President Obama now on his way to Asia. He's got a 9-day trip. That's nice. Unfortunately, it's just as the clock is running out for the Congressional Super Committee. So I want to ask tonight, is the Republican Super Committee tax deal dead? This is Senator Pat Toomey's deal. By the way, the deadline for the Super Committee, November 23rd. And the president made it quite clear, if there's no deal, the across-the-board budget cut is going to take place, about $1 trillion. Let's bring in Ohio Democratic Congressman Dennis Kucinich and New Jersey Republican Scott Garrett, who is the vice chair of the House Budget Committee. Dennis, thank you for coming back. Look, I just want to spend a little time on Pat Toomey's deal, because it does raise revenues by about $500 billion, while it lowers marginal tax rates, while it removes deductions, the personal deductions, from upper-income taxpayers. Now, that is a concession to you Democrats. Why aren't you jumping on board?
Well, you know, if all this is a discussion about tax cuts, and it's not about cutting wasteful Pentagon spending, it's not about getting out of wars, it's not about addressing our trade deficit, it's not about priming the pump of the economy, getting America back to work, moving business forward, creating wealth. If it's all about tax cuts, are you kidding me?
Well, there's $750 billion worth of spending cuts. Now, I would triple it, Dennis. But there are spending cuts because, again, I want to say from what I report,
what are they cutting?
The Democrats don't want to cut anything. That's what I gather. You tell me, besides defense, Dennis, what would you cut? And then I'll go to Scott.
Okay. First of all, get out of these wars and stop the United States policy of trying to move into every country whose government we disagree with. We've got to stop wasting money on wars. Number two, we've got to do something about our trade deficit. You know, we're talking about $550 billion a year. Those are jobs out of our country. We've got to start bringing work back into this country. So those are two areas where we could start to make significant strides towards righting our economy. And we've got to prime the pump of the economy.
All right. Well, I want to prime the pump through tax cuts, but I mostly want to get Scott involved in this. Scott Garrett, look, actually, in some sense, the defense cuts are already in there. The exiting from Afghanistan and Iraq is already in the baseline. There's about $1 trillion. Right. I want to ask you, as a Republican, can you buy into Pat Toomey's idea? He'll eliminate a lot of deductions. He'll lower marginal tax rates. The deal produces about $500 billion in new revenues. Can you and other Republicans in the House sign on to this Toomey deal, or is it dead in the water?
Well, Republicans obviously want to see the final language on any deal on taxes. The RSC, the Republican Study Committee, came out with something akin to this just last week, saying let's look at the tax code. Let's make it revenue neutral, though, at the end of the day. What do we do on that? On the corporate side, let's bring down corporate rates, get rid of just about all the deductions on the corporate side. Same thing on the individual sides, bring down the marginal rates there, do away with a lot of the deductions. But the devil's in the details on all of these things. Is at the end of the day, you're not bringing down the marginal rates enough so that effectively overall
but it's the only pro-growth it's the only pro-growth item out there. Otherwise, this is sheer root canal austerity. And the president said today, if you read the reports from the plane, I know he shouldn't be going to Asia, but he's going to Asia, whatever. He told people he spoke to, including Jeb Henseling, he said, if you can't cut a deal, we're going to have a sequester. That's the across-the-board tax, the across-the-board spending cut, you know all too well, about $1 trillion, half of which will come out of defense. So I ask you, would you rather have a pro-growth tax reform that gins up some revenues, or do you want to just take the whole across-the-board spending cut?
Well, of course you wouldn't want either one of those, but I would not be in favor of anything that at the end of the day puts an additional tax burden on the American public, whether on the corporate side or on the individual side, even if you have some other portions of revenue of pro-growth aspects to it. That's the Republicans' principle from day one. That's what we campaigned on. We are not going to inject in this economy additional tax burden on any segment of the economy. We can always do that in any.
All right, Dennis, you're not going to buy into the tax reform. You want more what? You want spending increases? Did I hear you suggest that? You know that's not going to happen.
We ought to be expanding the economy right now, not contracting it. How do you do that? Government, instead of borrowing money from the banks, instead of borrowing money from Japan, from China, from South Korea, we ought to be spending the money into circulation, investing in America. If the Fed can create money out of nothing with its quantitative easing and give it to banks or give it to banks in Europe, why can't our government claim our constitutional authority to be able to create millions of jobs, rebuilding America's infrastructure? We should be expanding our economy. We should be creating wealth.
You're
we should
right,
be creating jobs.
But more spending, you're already running $1 trillion a year deficits. The total debt is up to $15 trillion. This is a Greece-like, Italian-like situation. You can't seriously tell me you want to spend more. And anyway, Dennis, you know this. If there's no deal on the super committee, then you're going to have $1 trillion across-the-board budget cut, which guys like me, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm fine. Just cut the budget by $1 trillion.
Well, frankly, when you're looking at Greece and Italy, they don't have the kind of economic power the United States of America has. They haven't gotten themselves into a jam over costs of war, as we have. They haven't these huge trade deficits that we do. So we still have, Lawrence, what I'm suggesting is that we have control over our economic destiny still. And that this super committee, which for the process I don't agree with at all, we have 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate. We ought to be making that decision in Congress, not giving it to 12 czars. We need to change our thinking about America and create wealth again and get the government involved in it and stimulating the private sector in a way that everybody wins. Well, this whole approach we're taking right now is a losing approach.
I agree with you on the losing approach. I agree with you about wealth. It was that last sentence about government spending that I can't quite agree with, but I want to turn it back to my friend Scott. Sure. What's going to happen here? Just look, this is going to be drama, and financial markets are going to be looking at this, even though there is an across-the-board spending cut at the end of the day. What's going to happen?
But remember, the across-the-board spending cuts at the end of the day is not this month, this year. It's all the way to 2013 before those cuts go into effect.
But the deadline is.
But the deadline's now, so they know that when do these cuts go into effect? When the next president, hopefully another different president comes in, when the next Congress is in here.
Oh, so you're saying it's just phony baloney?
It really is, because even those who are on this defense side saying we can't have this go into effect, remember, we'll have a new president, a new Congress, hopefully a new Senate as well.
So you take the sequester now, and it'll all be repealed later. The money will be added back in later.
It's not a good thing for a number of reasons. From a Wall Street perspective, if they look at Congress and say you can't, once again, can't get things done, it's not good.
It's all a lot of crap. That's what you're telling me. It's all a lot of garbage. Is that right? Is that fair?
Well, Dennis said that what the super committee is doing is not the correct approach. It should be Congress doing this. I agree with them in this. Maybe your assessment is a good assessment as well.
All right, we will leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen. Dennis Kucinich, I appreciate it very much.
Scott.
Scott Garrett, as always, coming up on Kudlow, Italy and Greece get new leaders. Are they real?